to inspire. With our words, we'll set your dreams on fire. Adonis' finest brew.
Ladies and gentlemen, Andre Goolsby back at you once again. Another exciting episode of Adonis Finest. Adonis Finest represents some of the most extraordinary people in my life. We recently had an Adonis Finest award ceremony that was here at BMW of South Atlanta, and I have one of my extraordinary friends who received one of the trophies of this being one of the most extraordinary people I know, State Representative Derrick Jackson. Thank you so much, man, for being here.
Man, no, thank you for the invitation, man.
We're more than, he's more than clients. This is actually my friend.
Absolutely. Despite the 6 cars that you sold, right? You know.
Who's counting?
Working on child number 7. That's why, I just
right.
Andre, I need another vehicle.
Right. And we met at the Infinity deal.
That's correct.
And you recently purchased an X5, X6 here.
X6, that's correct.
BMW South Atlanta. I like the way you spread the money on the South side.
Yeah, because I'm I started off as a Mercedes man, then I went to Infinity once you enlightened me about the 2 products. And then, of course, my queen, she's a BMW fanatic. And so when it was time to get her vehicle, the BMW X6 was her vehicle of choice.
I love the way that you address your wife, the way you talk about her. I love that. You're queen. And I just recently asked you if you played chess. Mm-hmm. So there was a reason for that. There was a segue in, because I play also. I'm very good. So we'll have to sit down, because I have a feeling you're good at it.
All right. Andre, I got 3 trophies.
Okay, you're better than me.
So I want to qualify that good.
I don't even want to play.
And this was in New York, because I grew up in New York, as you know. So my coach, my wrestling coach, introduced me to the game because I play basketball and wrestling. But Coach Smith said, "Do you play chess?" I'm like, "Coach, I don't play chess, ma'am. I play basketball and I'm a wrestler." And so one afternoon, he sat me down and introduced me to the game of chess. A year later, I was a 3-time champion, district regional champion in New York.
1 year later?
1 year later.
Amazing. Now, for all the chess players out there that are watching, tell me about the dynamic of the pieces, because I was going somewhere with the queen portion. Mm-hmm. When I first learned to play chess, I realized that the queen could move in all these different ways. Mm-hmm. So my queen I was killing people, my queen was just go through and but when my queen was taken, I noticed I didn't operate well. I'd lose games, and so I had to learn how to play without my queen. Mm-hmm. So that's a psychological play. And then the way that you talk about your queen, I said, he's a chess player. So that's
absolutely. And she is my queen, right? Because, man, if something happens to my wife, the entire house shuts down, right? If she becomes ill, or she goes away on a girls' trip, everything just shuts down. And so coming from a place of being a chess player, the king is the dominant player on the chessboard, but the king is only as good as the queen. And so, so when we got married, I always refer to her as my queen, because I'm only as good as my queen. And so she allows for me to do the things that I do as an elected official. She allows for me to be the husband and the father that I am. And so all that is predicated on her. So when people hear me say, as you just articulated, when I introduce her as my queen, because there's a philosophical purpose of highlighting her as my queen.
I love that. We talked about, you just mentioned elected official, state representative. I remember when you were climbing that ladder. I remember that. District
68.
68. 60,000.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, 65,000. So each district, there's 180 districts in the state of Georgia.
Right.
And so every 10 years, those districts are redefined. And so you're right, my district started off at 64.
Okay.
But after the last, it now became 68. It's just where they start the number and count. But when you think about how important the census is. Because see, the census sets up the district, how many per House member constituents you would get, and then for the Senate, it's the same way. So the Senate, each district is 180,000.
Okay.
But there's only 56 of them. And so every 10 years, we go through this redistricting process and identifying what the population is, and then we equally divide the constituency for each district.
Got it. That was a journey for you, and I felt like I followed you. I mean, every time, even now, I see you on television, and I see you like I remember one of the last times we spoke. I saw you on television on one channel at about midnight. No, it was about 8 in the morning on one channel, and on another channel, I was going to bed at about 11 p.m. You were in the chamber, where you guys had literally closed the doors, and you were still vibrant. You were still out there. I said, now that's a guy right there we need and we want on the front line.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right, Andre. So what ended up happening, there are some long days when we were in session, crossover and sine die. And so you will find me on one of the local networks talking about a particular bill, because we're always doing press conferences. But even in the later days, when we get to a point where we have some long days, where we're there 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, debating and discussing and around legislation, how to, what's best for 11 million Georgians, right? And so the Democrats, we have our way of a path forward for the 11 million. Republicans have their pathway forward. And then we look at industries, right? I know you're in the automobile industry, but Democrats, we are pro-automobile industry, from electric vehicle to gas and hybrid and everything in between, because we realize that mobility is essential to be able to get these 11 million people around, not just from their home to their jobs, but to everything in Atlanta, right? Because we try to create Atlanta to be a destination, right? Not just for the weekend, neither. I mean, all 7 days, if you are in the Atlanta hemisphere, there's something to be done. And so we want to make sure that from your own transportation to public transportation, we afford those individuals the mobility that they need, regardless if they're 13 years of age or 80 years of age. They should have the right to be able to move about as they see fit.
I heard an interesting stat on the radio on B103 Monday, and what it said was Atlanta, out of all the major cities here in the United States, Atlanta has become the most popular destination because its flights coming in are more inexpensive than, say, Los Angeles or Miami or New York. It's more inexpensive to come in, and there's so much to do here in this city. Atlanta has become the #1 place for out-of-towners and people out of the country, to be able to come in to visit and have a good time. The most inexpensive big city. Isn't that amazing?
It is amazing, but it also tells me that our cost of living, when you comparatively speaking, comparing Atlanta to, let's say, New York City, right? As a fellow New Yorker, or Los Angeles,
yes,
right, out in California. So the cost of living in Atlanta is far better than those other metropolitan areas. But what really makes Atlanta such a global metropolitan city is that airport, right?
Yes.
Hartsfield-Jackson International.
Yes.
You can get on that airplane and find yourself however many hours later in Dubai.
Yes.
Non-stop flights,
yes,
right? Our airport is 27 years strong, being deemed as the world's busiest airport. Amazing. We move 114 million people go through that airport. 114 million. Think about that for a second. Let that resonate. Let that marinate. Right?
Right? And
so that's the reason why Atlanta is perfectly situated to be on the global stage. World Games going to be here in a couple of years. We've had the Super Bowl. Of course, everybody knows about the '96 Olympics, and I'm sure we're going to have another Olympics. And so if it's a world stage event, Atlanta is always in the conversation.
Yes, yes. I saw the Marvin Arrington Jr. He did the documentary Boat Legs on his father, who was one of my clients and one of my beautiful friends. We're going to have him on soon. But I remember when we were here the other night when we were doing the Adonis Finest Awards, I saw you, Marvin Arrington Jr., and Vince Williams, another beautiful friend of mine, mayor of Union City. When I saw you three together, I was like, I need a photograph. I need that. I was like, the brothers out there on the front line. But they did such a good job in putting that airport together. Marvin Arrington Sr., it was Maynard Jackson, so I'm from there. I'm from here, so I remember just them putting together just this miraculous project, which was the airport.
Yeah, Maynard Jackson. I mean, say what you will, a remarkable man.
Of course,
right? He was visionary. He realized even back then, bless his soul, how if Atlanta can brand themselves in a manner to where we're not just confined to the boundaries of Georgia, right? That we do have a say in this global economy, not just by air, but sea as well, right? And so if you look at what the things that we're doing over in Savannah, that port over there, I mean, we're dredging out to get deeper and bigger merchant ships. Now we also playing in the space of film, television, right? Where 14 years ago we were roughly getting about $300 million a year in revenue. Today we're getting $10 billion.
Amazing.
Just in film, television, right? And so we have 18 industries that we do exceptionally well here in Georgia, which is the reason why we're sitting on a $16 billion surplus. That's a surplus. Right? Surplus. That means after we done paid all our bills, $16 billion going to our Treasury Reserve. And so now we have to discern what do we do with those kind of dollars, right? Making sure that urban, suburban, rural areas are getting their needs met. Make sure that no of the 536 cities, no 159 counties are left behind. And so we got to do that the right way, but politics is a little bit dynamic, right? And everybody believes that they have the best way forward. I believe the Democrats, we have a better way that is inclusive, right? And so that way the 700,000 small businesses in Georgia get the necessary support from their state government, much like how we do the Fortune 500 companies, right? Because all big companies started off small, right? And so we just got to figure out what's the best way to do that, how we grow these small businesses, because them small businesses are direct representation of our friends, as you mentioned, our family, their hopes and dreams, and especially when you think about the black women in Georgia. They have a lion's share of small businesses in Georgia.
That's true.
And so we got to make sure that we do right by everyone, especially those who are typically left in the shadows.
That's great. It's wonderful that, and I didn't know that, and a lot of people did not know about that surplus of $16 billion. It seems like such an amazing, incredible amount of money, and it is. But if you divvy that up into where it's supposed to go, it's got to go to the right places in order to realize the betterment of everybody involved.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Andre, and that's the reason why I appreciate shows like yours, Adonis Finest, spotlighting these kind of things, because I think it's a responsibility for us all to make sure that this kind of information gets out there, right? My mother, bless her soul, she said, you do better when you know better. So it's the reason why they're banning books. There's a reason why shows like yours don't get the same kind of support as it should. And so I appreciate shows like yours and Roland Martin and others who are in this black media podcast area to highlight our stories, but more importantly, educating our community, so that way they will do better once they know better.
So when we talk about education, first and foremost on our mind is our youth. You know, our youth. You and I were at an event with South Fulton Chamber of Commerce, Merrill. You remember when he invited us to the event? And I was so impressed with Morrow. That was Morrow High School, right?
That's correct.
The flight simulators, and I was so thrilled. It's like $1 million project, right?
That's right.
It's like, that is so awesome for however they got it worked out for kids to be involved in programs like that. But please speak with us, to us about.
Andre, I think you're raising an excellent point, right? Because you and I, when we were in school, I mean, they gave us home ec, right? They were teaching us how, wood carvings and various trades. And I think we can do the same thing now. Unfortunately, we don't spread those resources to all those schools. When we do that, the very thing that you and I witnessed on that day, all these teenagers, they will thrive, right? So they all want to be able to have a flight simulator in their high school. They all want to be able to do film and television in their school. They all want to do auto mechanics and welding and HVAC in their school. Those resources are not spread around. And our children are remarkable future leaders, right? I mean, they're like sponges. If you tell them, especially in this technological age. I mean, you and I didn't have computers back then, right? I mean, we had a calculator, if you want to call that a computer. But now I look at my soon-to-be 5-year-old grandson, right? The things he can do through applications. It's amazing because just like children are sponges, and so if we invest in them today, they're going to be remarkable engineers tomorrow. They're going to be remarkable lawyers and doctors tomorrow. They're going to be remarkable leaders tomorrow if we educate them today. And so that's one of the things that I champion, to make sure that these resources are spread out through all urban, suburban, and rural schools, so that way, again, no child is left behind. They're getting the resources that they need. They're getting the wraparound services that they need. No child should go to school hungry. The most basic things, it's a responsibility of government to make sure we meet those children where they are, so that way they can thrive and not become something that we don't want in the future. We can dictate who they will become in the future, but we got to meet them where they are today.
I agree totally. At that same event at Morrow High School, I was standing beside you, and we stood for the Pledge of Allegiance. And I was standing beside you. I can't remember a time when I felt so proud to be an American. You were standing there. I was like, this guy, it dawned on me. I was like, he's a corporal,
commander, retired commander.
Retired commander. When that came, I was like, oh.
Yeah.
Tell me what that means to you. Tell me what that means.
Yeah. So I come from a long line of other men in my family that served in the military. Majority of them
you for your service.
Served in the Army. Me and my 4 other cousins went to the Navy. Because we realized you ain't gonna just drop us off in the middle of the forest and leave us, right? We ain't doing that. But when you think about the men, my great grandparents, grandfather that served in World War I and World War II, they may only have done 2 years or 3 years. Those who served in Vietnam, right? They immediately got out, and I get the reason why because they were treated badly. Andre, they were treated badly. All they wanted to do was to serve the country, but when they came home, they were treated less than. And then, so me and my 4 other cousins that, were basically looking at the military, an opportunity for us to serve, I had the mindset of just serving 4 years. But realizing them 4 years turned into 22 years. Realizing that I too can become an officer. I'm the first one in my family history to become a officer. And so everyone else was enlisted. So when that opportunity presented itself, I seized it. And it just made sense for me to stay in. But even after having been retired 19 years now, Andre, the last time I had that uniform on was 19 years ago. And when you and I were standing there, hearing that Pledge of Allegiance, hearing the music, I resurrect my ancestors because they could not do that. They could not stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance even when they were in uniform, right? They could not stand there and salute even when they were in uniform. They treated our enlisted black men differently back then. And so to be one as an officer, to be one who have served 22 years, I resurrect their spirit to say, anytime you see me, I'm channeling their spirit because I do the things that they could not. Wow. And so yeah, it was great for you to stand beside me. This honor, I do not take it lightly because I realize it's not just about me. It's about those on the shoulders I stand on. Those who made it possible for you and I and others in 2024 to be able to walk through the front door of a facility, or to be able to do the things that you're doing, right? To be a outstanding salesperson, to be recognized as such, all the accolades that you have. Someone else could not have done that. And so yeah, it's an honor, man, to do the things that I do because I realize there was someone else that paved the way.
So is that one of the things that make you so effective as, a leader out there in our community? Does that transition directly into being a public servant?
Yeah, Andre, I think you're hitting the core of my being, right? It keeps me humble. It keeps me grounded, right? It keeps me focused. It keeps me determined because I know one day I'm going to have to pass this baton off. And I want to make sure that I set them up for success. Someone asked me a couple weeks ago, they're like, hey, you ran for lieutenant governor back in 22.
I remember that.
What's next for you, right? And I tell folks, I said, man, running for lieutenant governor, I learned a lot during those 13 months.
What'd you learn?
That we have more shared values than differences.
What a beautiful thing to learn.
Right? I mean, I went into the most remote, rural parts of Georgia where I was the only black person in the stage. Right? And they were amazed that I was there. But I showed up. In South Georgia, it's about 4 hours away from us. But I showed up. At first, they were thrown off. They were like, who are you? Right? And I told them, I said, I'm a candidate for lieutenant governor. And they were like, okay, well, what's your name again? They're like, oh, you did RSVP. They were shocked that I RSVP, right? No other black candidates really go down here. But I wanted to demonstrate to them that, one, I'm not afraid, and two, I'm open to talking to you. I'm willing to sit down and reason with you. And they learned so much as I learned from them, that we got the same values. They too want to make sure that their children have all the resources available to go off to college. They too want to be able to make sure that their son go off to the military. They too want to have clean air and fresh water to drink. They want the same thing. Now, our suits are a little bit different. I got a little bit melanin in mine, and I don't run away from it. Right? I'm authentic. All right, on who I am. I realize that the mirror, the person that I see, I'm a black man, right? In the most remote area, that was 75% white, right? This place used to be a sundown town.
Wow.
Okay.
I know what sundown.
Okay.
Tell us what sundown town. So for the youth out there.
Yeah. No, that's a great question.
I've never heard.
So back in the Jim Crow era, especially in the South, blacks had to be home before the sun went down, before the lights, because if they did not, they can very well find themselves lynched, murdered, raped. Okay, and so to this day, there are some places, as quiet as it kept, are sundown towns, even in Georgia, Alabama, and Texas. You don't hear much about it, but you still see some residual. They'll still feel some kind of way if you are in their town passing through at nighttime. But them ghosts still exist. So sundown towns was, in a nutshell, where the law allowed for them to do what they feel necessary to keep their towns pure. And unfortunately, Georgia has a history. If you go back to 1906, there was a massacre right here in Atlanta.
There was.
If you go up to Lake Lanier, okay, there's a story where over 1,100 black people were killed.
Yep.
Okay, and so we cannot shy away from that history. I know a lot of people try to whitewash it or ban books, but those events occurred, and it's unfortunate. But we have to realize in 2024 that although they may not outright kill us, but there's some residual, which is the reason why I was just speaking on Daniel Lewis last night on Roland Martin's show. A young man, 27 years of age, was killed. Andre, him and his sister were coming back from an event, and unbeknownst to them, there were some police officers that did not identify themselves. They were in plain clothes, undercover police officers, and they were looking for a black man, whatever that description is, but he was black. And so Daniel Lewis' sister goes into the house. Daniel comes back out, trying to confront these individuals, make sure that everything was copacetic. He brought his gun because Florida is a stand your ground state.
Sure.
And they commenced firing 5 bullets into his chest. They did not declare themselves as police, stop. They didn't identify themselves, none of the sorts. And now you have a grieving family. But this is not the first time, right? You have a young man a few months ago, again in Florida, serving the Air Force. 23 years of age, Forson is his name. And we had the funeral here at New Birth. And it was a case of mistaken identity, and they went to the wrong apartment.
Saw that.
And they knocked on the door very aggressively. Airman Forson went to the door to find out what was going on. Opened the door. He had his gun in his hand. He did not raise it towards the police officer, and they too killed him. Right, and the list goes on. Right, George Floyd, Eric Gardner, Tamir Rice. And so, although these sundown towns are no longer exist, the killing of innocent, unarmed black men and women. I mean, let's take Breonna Taylor.
Yes.
Because we often say, "Oh, you know, what were you doing?" And people say, "Oh man, another black person killed." Okay, were they at the wrong time, the wrong place, hanging out with the wrong people, doing the wrong thing? No, Breonna Taylor was at home.
At home.
In her own bed.
In her bed.
Right? A nurse. Okay? And she still ends up dead. Okay? And so we have some police abuse, right? We cannot shy away from it, Andre. We got to meet it head on. They don't deserve qualified immunity. We don't even give physicians qualified immunity.
Great point. Great point.
Okay?
Never looked at it that
We
way.
don't even give firefighters qualified immunity, but we give them to law enforcement. And so we gotta make sure that we hold folks accountable. We can do that through both criminal and civil, as you know, charges, and say, when you abuse your power, when you violate your oath, when you misuse deadly force, you will be held accountable. In the last 15 years, 3,900 officers have been brought up on criminal charges. Only 2% were convicted. Whoa. That means 98% go on and become police officers in other cities, in other towns, in other states. Only 2% held accountable. And so we gotta, this people don't want to use race, but this is what it is. There's no reason why a black woman or a black man should end up dead when a mother dialed 911 because her son was having
an episode.
There's no reason why a Air Force veteran in DeKalb, butt naked, he ain't have no clothes on, no weapons in hand, end up dead.
I saw that.
Okay? And so we got to stop this violence. We got to show up, make sure the laws are stronger. And listen, I have a niece, I have a goddaughter, and I have a nephew who are in law enforcement, right? So I don't have nothing against law enforcement. Just do your job. Honor your oath, as I did when I was in the military. I honor my oath as a public official. Every time I have an oath, I have to honor it. Doctors have an oath.
Yep.
Nurses have an oath. Lawyers have an oath. We all have an oath for any particular reason. And so if no one else, Andre, have qualified immunity, why are we giving this to police officers? The reason being, because 200 years ago, citizens were being able to be deputized to hunt down slaves. This is the same law that they tried to use to justify the killing of Ahmaud Arbery. Remember?
I remember.
Okay, Ahmaud Arbery was just jogging in his own neighborhood, and they tried to use a law in Georgia that was 150 years old. And so we got to go back, update these old laws, make them modern, and say, when you see a black woman and a black man, just remember, they're human. That's somebody's husband, wife, daughter, sister, brother, uncle, aunt. They're human. If we just start with that premise, our society will become more free in calling the police when they need to call the police.
So interesting. When I was growing up, we were taught to respect the police. They're the good guys.
Well, they have programs back when you and I were growing up called Officer Friendly.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure did.
And that officer was in our community. That officer knew your mother, your dad, your uncle, right? And we knew them, right? And so there was a very kind, gentle relationship between the community and our law enforcement. But they did away with that program, Andre, in the early 90s. They did away with Officer Friendly, right? And so now these officers are not assigned to their community. You may have an officer that live on one side of town assigned to another community, and so they're not very familiar. And when you're not familiar, you may end up dead, right?
Right. So many points after that. So do we you talked about society, do we as a society, do we outgrow this? Is that the way we get rid of this? Because you can hit it, head on, but there's so many different layers, and it's like taking water and trying to put it in a cup, teaspoon at a time, So do we outgrow this, or is there a shortcut that we can come to a happy medium?
So I think the answer is yes and no. We can outgrow it, but the shortcut is if legislation create this environment, legislation can get us out of this situation.
And that's what you're
right, because qualified immunity is a law, and we know how, as lawmakers, we know how to exempt ourselves and put an asterisk. We know how to create environments. So when you think about healthcare, that was all our healthcare environment was created by a law. When we think about law enforcement, it's created by a law. And so if these laws, Andre, can create the situation, these laws can deal with the situation.
That's the way to go. And that's why you're on the front line. That's why anytime I see you out there, I'm like, hey, that's, but see, I know you personally. I know who you are. Another sensitive, yes.
Do me a favor.
Yes, sir.
On the point that you just made.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, on the point that you just made, Andre, I want you to go back and I want you to say, okay, well, what about the folks who say that voting doesn't matter? What about the data?
Beautiful, good,
Then when we can expand on that just to bring it in a little bit more.
Okay.
All right, appreciate it.
I'm gonna start right there. Can I start just right there?
Absolutely. All right. Okay. And 3, 2, 1, go.
So we talked about you being on the front line, and we talked about how to make change, right? Some people say voting doesn't count. Voting is not real. Like there's so many people who are still not registered to vote. How do you feel about that?
I live by Dr. King's words. Another great alpha man. I may plug that in there, as a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. I think, Andre, Dr. King says this arc, this moral arc towards justice, we have to bend it, right? And that bending requires for us all to help bend it. And part of that effort of bending this change is through voting. If voting wasn't so important, that we wouldn't be after your vote, right? We wouldn't be changing the laws. And so that's the reason why I tell folks when they say, well, I'm gonna sit this one out. Your ancestors could not sit it out. I want you to think about this for a second. After Reconstruction, and we talking about back in the 1800s, right? 1863 on, for 14 years during Reconstruction, when black people can vote, they had poll taxes. They had to guess the number of bubbles on a bar of soap, the number of jelly beans in a jar, right? I mean, it's a great thing, Andre, that I wasn't born back then, because I would say, you tell me the number of bubbles on the bar of soap. You tell me the number of jelly beans that's in the jar, right? I would have been that Frederick Douglass, right? Or that Nat Turner, depending on which day. But I digress. So, voting is the only equalizer in our society. I don't care if you are a millionaire, billionaire, or a thousandaire. You get one vote, and they're all equal. I don't care if you're from Michigan, or Georgia, or Florida. You get one vote. And that one vote is so powerful. It is the keystone to our democracy, Andre. And so your question is so appropriate, because people think, well, my vote, it won't count, or should I or shouldn't I? And the answer is yes, your voice matters. Yes, voting is your power. Yes, it's your voice. Yes, it helps us change this democracy. It allows for you to apply your effort in this democracy. So here's the thing I tell folks: the day you were born and the day you die, you got to participate in this government. Now, there are many ways you can participate. Voting is the keystone of your participation, right? Because when people complain about taxes or resources, I'm like, you can change that through voting. And we were duped, Andre, because we were explained while we were all growing up that we vote every 4 years and only focus on the presidency. The truth of the matter, we vote every year. And you voting not just for president, you voting for council members, sheriffs, prosecutors, everyone, judges. And so that one vote, you can change the landscape of your community, you can change the landscape of your city, and your state, and your nation. How will you vote? And if a person not doing a great job, you vote them out of office. You give them a pink slip. And so I always tell my 65,000 constituents, you all are the employer, I'm the employee.
Wow.
Right? Think about this, Andre. In the state of Georgia, there's only 236 of us making decisions and laws for 11 million people. 236, 11 million. 236, 11 million. So we, the people, we are always going to be in control until you're not. And if we're not careful, especially this year, when you got someone that's talking about being a dictator, you can't vote. You don't have a voice, and you do not have power. I've been to countries where there are dictators, where there are communists. They do not have a democracy. I've been to countries where the woman walks 15 paces behind the man. And those countries still exist today. We don't want that in the United States. I don't want my queen walking 15 paces behind me, right? And so it's incredulous when people say, my vote doesn't count. Oh, it counts. And if it didn't, they wouldn't be after it. And so, and it not only does it count, but it demonstrated, Andre, when we were growing up, we never would have thought of Barack Obama and Michelle Obama being in the White House. It's never been done, right? Now, 2008, we realize, although we represent 14.2%, just 14%, that's it. But we realize when we get out and vote, 60 to 80% of us turn out and vote, that we can have a Barack Obama and a Michelle Obama, right? That's the strength and power of our vote. My grandmother would have been 104. She left this world not knowing that we can have a black woman as the first lady and a black man to be the president. Because for 100 years, it had never been done.
I saw my father cry twice in my life. One was when my mother passed. Two was when Barack Obama won the presidency. I just looked at it, I was in shock. I didn't want to move. And I was, yay, but I watched him and his tears just started flowing. He could not, he was shaking his head, he could not believe. And I get it. I mean, he was in World War II.
Oh, yeah.
You know, he was in World War II. He came back from fighting and, you know, he says, I'm still going through his disrespect. But he handled it. He would talk to me, to speak to me about things like character, things about forgiveness, things about love. That's why when I see you out there navigating through on the floor, I was like, I know who he is. I trust him. I believe in him. He's out here fighting for us. Your email address, vote Derrick Jackson. So good shot, Royce, on that part. Good shot on your part. Vote Derrick. So I can tell how passionately you speak about voting. And I'm just glad we did not miss that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you asking that question, and I appreciate you also talking about my email, because most folks just have their name.
Yes.
Right? I put vote in front of mine because I wanted to psychologically, every time you type in my email address, that you got to start off with vote.
Vote.
Right? Because our ancestors, again, I channel the spirits of my ancestors.
Yes.
They could not do this, Andre.
Right.
I mean, I can't even, to this day, I can't tell you the number of bubbles on a Dove bar soap, right? I can't tell you that during Easter we had, you know, my queen put this nice jar and my grandson, they eat these jelly beans. I can't tell you how many jelly beans in that jar, right? So our ancestors had to deal with that kind of foolishness, right? You know, we went over to the History Museum up in Washington, D.C.
Wow. I wanted to go there.
Man, I encourage every black family to make their way. That's got to be on your bucket list. But there's a scene in there where it has color fountain and white fountain. Here's the sad part. Both of those water fountains are being sourced by the same water.
So it's mindset, thought process.
Yeah, it got the same plumbing, the same source of water, but two different faucets. I didn't realize the three hidden figures until 2016. They were not in my history book, but three remarkable sisters that they used their skill set on mathematics to allow us to get to the moon.
Yep.
Right? The contributions of our people to this country, but yet they were treated that they had to go in separate water fountains and separate restrooms, right? And so we got to remind ourselves of our history. Someone told me a long time ago, our history explains the present, but it also gives us a way forward. Because if you don't understand the future, you are doomed to repeat your history.
That's true.
And that's the reason why I I fight against this banning of books because those books explain our history. And if you remove the history, the future is doomed to repeat, right? And so we cannot repeat the pains of the past. And so, but yet use that history to explain the present.
Sure.
And so I am, the reason why you see me move the way I do, I'm always focusing and I revere our ancestors. Like I said, it keeps me grounded, it keeps me humble, and it reminds me that this thing is not about me.
And not being about you. You are so embedded deeply in your family. Your spiritual values, your family values, and you combine those. You and I had the most interesting conversation, which we always do. Whenever we talk like this. I mean, and I can never get enough of it. I just get so energized and fulfilled from talking to you. We had an interesting conversation, and I was thinking about it last night. I even had to pray on it. It's like, how can I back into this in order to get there? Because I know it's an extremely sensitive subject. So I'm just going to back into it by saying we had a conversation about Job. And about what you went through, about faith, and about love, and about character, and about patience, about resilience. We had that conversation. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, so for the Adonis Finest audience, what Andre is asking is, I was married to my first wife for 31 years.
I knew her. I met her.
Oh yeah, and just a beautiful being, just a beautiful being. And for 31 years, you know, when she had breast cancer the first time, and she beat it, right? And we're like, ain't nothing but God, ain't nothing but God. But then it came back, and it came back with a vengeance. What I discovered during her last 18 months was how God understands how he walks with us, even the most dark, traumatic times of our lives, but how God also, Andre, through his spirit, through us, let us know that one, he is with us, he haven't left us, and even though when we're praying and the results are not what they are, Job, through the illustration of Job lost his friends, he lost his family, he lost his livestock, he lost the millions of dollars. Job lost everything. Everything. If you understand the story of Job, he lost everything. But by the time you get to the very end of Job, it's 41 chapters. So for 40 chapters, he went through a miserable journey, losing everything, his family, everything. But by the time you get to the end of Job, that final chapter in Job, how God reminded him, he said, I was with you in every walk, every step. Not only did God bless him 3 to 4 times more, gave him another queen, enlarged his family, enlarged his territory, and Job realized God giveth, God can take it away. But he never lost his faith. He never lost his character, and he never lost who he was as a being, as a father and as a husband. And so during that whole walk, I tell folks that was my walk. After losing someone who I've been with for 31 years and realizing that that was not the end, right? That God still had more for me. And a year later, it was just an amazing moment. My Proverbs 31 queen and I met, and we have not looked back. And that's why we got this amazing family of 7. And I tell everybody, you're going to go through some dark days, but just realize guys, those three things. He's still with you. Don't lose your faith, and do not surrender your character.
So I love the part about, because you had girls.
All girls.
All girls. So your new queen had the son that you had always wanted, right? So now that blended family is more, you talked about a certain completeness that it gave you.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so you're exactly right. And so the part that you're highlighting, as I share with you, so I had 3 girls. Camilla had 1 daughter and 3 boys.
Right.
And so this perfect blend. Her daughter always wanted to have sisters. Right.
Right.
I always wanted to have sons.
Right.
Right? And so here, each component in each of our family always had this yearning for something. And 7 is completeness.
Completeness.
Right? And so it was just a perfect matrimony. Our children are amazing. Our young adults.
Right. Don't call them.
Excuse
me.
Especially because the oldest, Taylor, is a doctor.
Of course.
Taylor's a doctor, pediatric surgeon, doing remarkable things up in Chicago. And Tamara is doing great things. She's right here in Atlanta. Zoe graduated from Yale. She's up in New York City doing great things. And then Trinity start her doctoral journey this fall. And then the boys, they play in football. James graduated from Duke. Barron played 2 years for Coach Prime. Now he plays football right here in Georgia. And then the youngest is at Morehouse. So, I mean, man, you talking about perfect blend. And I tell everybody, I don't say that to impress you, but to impress upon you. To impress upon you that if you just keep the faith, to impress upon you to know that you're going to go through some dark times. You're going to go through that valley that people tend to always repeat and recite. But what does it really feel like? What does it really look like? But there's this double rainbow at the end, right? Moses had to deal with it, Noah had to deal with it, and Job had to deal with it.
Yes.
And I always tell folks that why Job, and I feel the spirit of Job is because when Michelle passed away, I thought I lost it all. Right, my best friend.
I was worried about you.
30. Yeah, no, listen.
I was worried about you.
And 31 years, right? And so there's a lot of biblical connections. You know, I was with her for 31 years. Proverbs 31. Okay, and so there's a lot of biblical connections. God answered prayers on His time, in His way. We just got to live out that prayer.
Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for thank you for being so transparent about your personal life, about your life as a public servant, and just you as a man. More young men need to see men like you, so we can see that we can be more than athletes and entertainers. You know, we can be on the front line. And I think at the end of the day, as we start to land the plane and we look back on our lives, I think our lives are defined by some of the things that we've done.
Right.
And you, Derrick, you are one of the most extraordinary, one of the most amazing men that I've ever met. And I'm honored to know you.
Brother, I appreciate you and what you do in the community. And I agree, especially for black men, I think we have to have the transparency piece that you highlighted, which is the reason why, as one of the ambassadors for the African American male wellness, we got this event. I would love to have you come down to Morehouse September 14th.
I got the email. I'll be there.
September 14th. We're encouraging men, black men in particular, to come down. This is going to be Black Men Wellness Day, because black men need to be transparent personally. Black men need to go and get their health and wellness checkups annually,
Yes.
right? And black men need to be reminded that they are a king, right? To finish the story the way we started, they are a king on the chessboard, right? They should be the last piece standing, but don't sacrifice those other pieces. Don't sacrifice your pawn, your knight, your bishop, and definitely do not sacrifice your queen. We got to stand up for our community, and starting with our household, and we have to be visible, right? We got to be visible, and I appreciate the Adonis Finest show highlighting these kind of things, because if we don't, who?
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I look forward to more episodes with Adonis Finest.